Hey everyone, how are you all doing? Hello. So in the afternoon lecture, we will continue talking about APIs, and we will start um, looking at the syntax of calling APIs. So in the morning, you had, oh, no audio? You can't hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Maybe Sundas is from your side. Okay, so in the morning, we talked about APIs. Okay, first, you've talked about the client-server model, how it's important and what we can achieve using that model, and then you have been introduced to APIs with and response codes of REST APIs or HTTP requests. So in the afternoon, we will revisit APIs one more time, just a quick reminder, and then we will talk about how we can use that in our code. And we will also talk about Postman, which is a graphical user interface software or program that allow us to test APIs. Okay, so as you have seen in the morning, APIs are very important, and it stands for Application Programming Interfaces, as you can see in the middle. So usually they just describe it as a bridge or as bridges between like the user or the web app and a server, which basically the API basically do some certain task. So APIs makes a lot of tasks easier, like for both, for the developers. So developers, when they do their code, when they write their code, when they build their programs or softwares, they use APIs. The reason for that is the developer doesn't want to like rewrite a whole like for a certain service, the developer doesn't want to rewrite the whole service from scratch. Instead, there's APIs on the internet, free APIs, or even paid APIs that will provide this service. Or sometimes the service is related to like another website on the internet. One of the most famous APIs is actually the Maps API, Google Maps. Yeah, the Google Maps API. So how API works is the client through the web app that is built by the developer do some certain requests through the internet, and the API go to the server that the developer that the developer decided to go to and retrieve data from database and give it back to the user. So you can think of APIs as a bridge between a request and a server that provides certain tasks or resources. So an example of that is Google API. So let's say you have a website, and okay, I don't want to do that to the console. I just want to look at it from a higher level. So imagine you want to embed like Google Maps or a map in your website. So you don't need to build like Google Maps from scratch or to build maps from scratch. you can use the Google Maps API, which is provided by Google, to use that service in your page. So you can follow the instructions and you can just embed, you can just add a script like this to your Google Maps, to your website, and you would have a Google Map embedded in your page. So this is very famous and used, very, popular and used example, which is the Google Map API. Also, sometimes maybe in news website, you would see like this rectangle here. You would see a rectangle and has like inside, you would see a tweet from Twitter, or what is called X now. So you'd see a tweet in a rectangle. So also this could be like rendered on the screen or brought from Twitter using the Twitter API. So these APIs again is provided by these like companies, by Twitter, by Google. There's Facebook, there's YouTube. So we don't need to write everything from scratch. We use the APIs, and the client, when the client opened the web page calls, when the client like opened the news page, the API is called and the data is retrieved from Google Maps to the client and rendered on the screen. So the idea is, like, as a developers, our job is basically, you can imagine it as here as building the API or using the API and allowing the user to use it. So users, like normal users, they don't know about APIs, but they use it when they just tap and click to retrieve information. And the job of developers is to build the website, and that includes using APIs with different like services out there. There's GitHub API, also there's Wikipedia articles. Also, you can use the API of Wikimedia. So there is a software called Postman. Have you talked about, did you talk about Postman in the morning lecture? Okay. So Postman is, okay. So Postman is a software for testing APIs. So usually when developers like use API like the Google one, before they embed or use that in their code, they can use Postman. The reason is that it's GUI, as you can see, user interface, and like everything is pre-built. You just need to post URL here, and you would receive the results. So there's no complications. And it also has many, like, there's collections. So if like for backend developers, this would be there's features for backend developers, like there's collaboration, there is collections. They can look at the history of APIs used, workspaces. So and there's also private networks. So for today's lecture and in our course, we are not going that deep, but we use Postman to test our APIs before we use these APIs in our code. And simply by just, clicking, so we are in the workspace, which is my workspace, the default one. We click on the plus, and we just have an untitled request. We can rename it, and we can just use the method. We will talk about the method in a moment. We paste the URL and of the API, and we would have the results. So usually the way we call APIs is just a URL like the one you're seeing here. So these are called HTTP requests or web APIs. So the HTTP stands for hypertext something. S for secure, there's HTTP and there's HTTPS. But when you see the word HTTP, yes, markup. Okay, that's HTML markup language. Okay, let's check it out. Hypertext, yeah, transfer protocol. So when you see HTTP, that means application, the application of the web. This is a protocol for the application layer in the web. So a protocol means a way of communication. So how web applications, like how we communicate with web applications, we use a protocol. A protocol means there's standard way to do the communication. Like for us humans, when we meet, we shake hands, for instance. This is the protocol of saying hello. When we communicate with web applications, the way or the standards of communication is one of the standard, or let's say the way web APIs communicate is through HTTP. So we are not going that deep again, but it's just for you to know that we are using or calling HTTP requests. So it has the shape of, as you can see, HTTPS. S stands for secure. Without the S, it's less secure. It's like it adds like a layer of encryption at the application level. And there is the link to the API or the server. Basically, the link to the server, and the API is the whole process. We will see that once we write the code, you will see the full syntax. So there's methods for when using APIs. Get, post, put, patch, delete. Those are like the most used ones. Get is the most also famous. As you can see, I just open start and I have get as a default. So each one of those has its own use, and there's small differences between them. So get is, today we are going to talk about get. Tomorrow we will look at put another methods. So basically, when you use the method get, it's used to retrieve data. This is like the general idea, is that when we call an API to a certain server using the get method, we are asking the server to give us certain data. So as you can see in the GUI, we choose by selecting, and we just put the URL and we just click send, and we will have the results. So now we are testing. We don't have like any API that we are applying. So we are in a testing phase. So usually in testing, we use Postman. You can use, of course, Node or JavaScript, as we will see next. But it's recommended to use Postman because, as I told you again, you just need to paste the URL. So you are minimizing any syntax or logical errors in your program by using the GUI here. And also there is collaborating and other advanced options, as I told you in the beginning. But this is not used or applicable when it comes to production. So once you want to release the code, of course you want to move your URL requests to your code and push it with your GitHub files. Okay. So this is Postman, and to test our API today, there is there's this service which is called Mock API. So this is built. I'm not sure if it's open source, but it's like service.io. Let's see what .io means. Yeah, open source. So this is open source, as you can see, .io. So the domain names, as you know, like .com is usually commercial. So it's just to identify the website. This is identified as open source. It's an open source service provided by developers for us to test APIs. So if you can use this, just visit Mock APIs. I can send you the link on the chat. If you want on the lab time, you can use it. This is something extra, but I'm gonna use it today just to test the API. So you can just log in using your GitHub account, and you would have an access to the Mock API, create a project. We can call it test. Those are optional fields we can just ignore for now. And we have our project, this project. So as you can see, it provides me with an endpoint. The endpoint, as you can see, is like at the tail of the URL. The endpoint is you can imagine it as the door that you can knock on that server to retrieve your data, or to have your to request your to ask for your request, basically. So the endpoint, as you can see, it's grayed out here because it depends on the data. So this is, imagine this is a server, and for now it's an empty. This is the URL of the server, which has this auto-generated by Mock API. And now I can create the endpoints. And the endpoints, in this case, they're going to be database resources. So this is a very simple server. It's just a server that contains data. We will talk about, of course, databases later, but imagine I have a database of users, and the schema is as the following. Is auto-generated also by the Mock API. Did you also talk about this in the morning lecture? Or this is this is the first time you're seeing this, like the Mock API? Oh, okay. So again, you don't need to use it if you don't want to. I just sent the link on the chat, but it's just to let you know what I'm doing next, what I'm gonna do next. Okay. So imagine I'm just creating a server that has certain data. So those are all options. I'm concerned with the name of the name of the data, or the database table that I want to retrieve. And I just click create, and for now it's empty. Mock API provides a way to fill users automatically. Now, as you can see, it's an empty array or JSON. So if I click like this, I have 30 users, 31 users. Those all, you click on data, you can see this is an array of JSON objects. I have, for each object, I have created at the time of creation, which is now, the name, auto-generated names, avatar, or auto-generated avatars, and ID. So this is related to database. Don't think about it now, but just know that I have these data under users on this server. Now, this API provide me with these users. This is the job of this API. I mean, the server contains this, and I can use an API request to retrieve these data. So today, as I told you, we are talking about GET. So I can just do something like this. And if I click send now, I received the HTML. So I received the page, which is something I'm not looking for. As you can see, it says the endpoint. I'm looking for the users. So I just do /users get. So get the users. So basically get the users under this server or URL. So I click send, and I retrieved all the data under users. So when I click here data, I'm looking at the data on Mock API, but when I look at the data here, I'm looking at it locally. So if you remember in the morning, you talked about status codes. So I received okay. So imagine this is the client and this is the server behind. So I'm calling from the client here to the server to give me users. I sent request from here to here. I received response with 200 status code. It took this millisecond, and the size is 199. So basically, I requested a file, and the server provided me with what I asked for. So this is a simple API to retrieve data. Again, there's many ways that APIs could be handled or used, like as I told you, Google Maps, embedded YouTube video, and even sometimes you can transcribe audio into text. There's many services out there, many APIs, free APIs, depends on the use or what do you want to do with those APIs or those services. It's up to like what you are doing basically. So this is Postman. Now, when we do this using JavaScript, we use a function called fetch. So we use fetch. This is a function that allow us to call APIs programmatically, you could say, using code, and it's integrated in our code. It's part of our code. So you have HTML, you're rendering the screen. At the same time, you can call APIs using the fetch function. And to use fetch, we need this is gonna depend on your Node version, but you need to install, since we are using JavaScript, we need to install Node fetch. So to use fetch, we need the package from Node, which is Node fetch. And we need to add the model of fetch as we do usually when we add any node package. So we say calls, we can call it fetch and say require node fetch. Now we can use fetch to call APIs. And to do so, again, if you remember from yesterday, we learned async and await. So we usually use, we call APIs with async and await in an asynchronous manner. And the reason is we are calling a server outside of our client and we are waiting for the results. And that usually takes time, depends on the size of the data, the status of the server, and so on. So we usually use async and await, and also to handle errors, if you remember from yesterday, and to call multiple APIs also. For that reason also we use async await. So let's say you have on one page, you have multiple APIs and we don't know the status of the server of each, and each could take different amount of time to be successful or to have results at the end. So we use async await. So we don't block our code, we keep the code running. So we keep the code running and we handle errors accordingly for each API. So any questions so far before I start coding about the concept? If there's anything that is clear about mock API, Postman. This word, for me personally, when I hear API, sometimes with time you would just you'd find it confusing. What is API and what is not API? So it's a good approach to have like a model in mind about what API is. What is a server? What is an API? If you have these in mind, this would make things easier. So the client server model, imagine the client server model first. There's server, there's client here, server here. Client server model is client calls the server listen to users, and user listen to servers respond to clients. APIs are like the bridge or the connection, they call sometimes the port between the client and the server that the developers build. So this is what API means. Okay, good question. In JavaScript, promises and async await, they're the same with very small differences. Async await is a newer version of asynchronous functionality. The syntax is a new version of asynchronous functionality, but both provide asynchronous functionality. So both concepts do the same job, like with very small differences, but both do the same job. So promises, when you use promises in JavaScript, you should have keywords of resolve and reject. But in async await, we do this, we don't use the keywords of resolve and reject. We say, as we have seen yesterday, and as we will see today, we say async for the function, and then we await for certain task. And based on the response, we do the resolve and the reject. So if there's an error, this is a reject. If there is success, if the status code is X and X, then do this. If the status code in this and that, then do that. So this gives us more like a better way to handle errors, I would say, as async on the wait. And the code would be nicer than, or more like clearer than promises. But again, they do the same job. But so in this course, we are learning async await. I think it's newer. Okay, it's not newer, it's built on top of promises. But it's more readable, yeah. So async await is more readable. It's not newer, it's basically the same because it's built on promises. So you said promises, and there's async await, there's callbacks. So this is in JavaScript, but is like async await. Try catch is a different block, different method. It's just for try a task or try line of code and catch error if there's an error. But promises, async await, it's related to asynchronous functionalities. Async await is more recent. It's built on top of promises. So in this course, we learned one syntax of async await. But if you find like the promises one easier for you, then you can go with that. Personally, I prefer async await because it's just two keywords that you can add or remove to the same exact code, and you can make it asynchronous or synchronous just by adding async and removing async and await. Okay. So for the mock API, it's again open source service. Imagine this is a server, and it provides us with endpoints of retrieving data. You can have different resources. So I have users. I can also have, let's say, tasks. I can add different, let's say, instead of avatar, I can have description. And this faker.js provides fake data, fake but real in a way. So so as you can see, there's colors, there's converse, there's this is generated randomly. Top descriptor. Okay. And I can just click create, and I can add up to 100 for each resource. I can look at the data. So description, regional, future, global, future, human. Yeah, there's names, fake names, but readable names. So I have tasks and I have users. This is how once we learn, okay, we shouldn't go there, the databases, but imagine this is a server. We can access it with this URL. And once we add the endpoint, we can call APIs to that server. We have seen this using Postman. So as you can see, I received okay. I received the data, and it took 331 milliseconds. I received all the data. And for users, it took less time, 143, because it's less records in the resource. So that's why we use just by clicking add new resource here. Okay, this is a free version, so I can add only 2 resources, but you can just click new resource and give it a name. So location and here address, you can have address of city. So give it some data and can look at it. You can see cities names. Now I can retrieve data of users also using APIs. So this is something when you handle APIs, especially the one like those, this you can say this is a database, and this is the server, and this is the URL or the API that I can use by providing the endpoint. So endpoints are very important in APIs. So this link is provided usually for you by the service, but and in mock API, this number determines your server. In different servers, you would have different names based on your authentication or access to that server. But endpoints is what makes you access different locations or data on the server. So let's say you want, let's say you want Francis, for instance. So I want to retrieve only Francis, and I can do that by calling the ID of Francis. So in databases, usually records are stored in a manner like this, where the ID for each record, there's a new ID with a unique identifier. So as you can see, I can change it from here. It's object ID. It's automatically generated and it's unique for each record. So again, we have location, city name, and I don't want the name, for instance. So as you can see, the ID is unique. There's no 2 records with the same ID. Then I want, as I told you, like user number 3, I can do / and then give the ID of that user, then send the request. So I retrieved all the user 3. So with this is very important when you imagine you have a profile page of a user, certain user, and you want to retrieve the information of that user. Then once the user logs in to the website, you have the ID of that user. And for any API calls, you have to add the ID of that user in order to retrieve the information of that user. So this would be 3, 2, based on the user that is the user that is using basically the web application. Okay, let's now look at code and how can we do the same with JavaScript. So again, we need an async function, as I told you. And we need to fetch users, let's say. We need to fetch all the users. So we either pass the API name on the parameters here as a parameter, or we can have it since this is only fetch users, since then it's gonna be always the same, the API. So I can just say let API URL equal to, I can go to my server and take the API URL from there. Paste it here, and then at the end I can add users. In that way, I'm fetching the users, and this is the only thing that this function is doing, fetching all the users. And I can call that function now anywhere in my code as we will see. Now to do so, I want to do fetch, and I want to use fetch. So I get for that fetch, and I can just provide the API URL. But you remember that we are using async, and this is an API. It requires some time. I want my code to keep running, so I want this to await. And I also want, if we look at fetch, okay, it doesn't give much information, but fetch basically it has a request and a response. So we can assign a request to fetch, and we receive response from fetch. Now the default behavior is fetch would use get method on the API that we pass to it. So default is get passing API, waiting for that response, and then I want the response to be stored here, so I can look at the message and do whatever I want with it. So, and again, you remember from yesterday, we need try catch because this is prone to error because we are handling with an outside server, a server outside. So many things could happen while we are calling the server. And many things could happen also like in the rest of my code while I'm asking the server. So to solve the first issues, I need a try catch for server requests. And I can just throw an error here. So I can either type the error like console log error, or I can just throw the error. Throwing the error, basically, as I told you yesterday, it's like return something, and it return it to the higher level where fetch users is called. So if we called fetch user here, then the error would be called from inside fetch user to this scope, to the outside scope. So you can either print or do operations inside, or you can throw error. Usually in functions, it's better to throw the error, but we can also console log. It doesn't make a difference actually here. But just to keep in mind, I try catch, you can throw an error. Okay. Now, I have the response here, but repeat the throw. Okay. So the throw part is, okay, I can explain it in a different way. If I have another function, which is the main function, and I have fetch users is called here. So in the main function, you know, there is other operations here, and also other code here. And I'm calling fetch users. So an error could happen inside fetch users, which is here during the try catch. So I want the error to be passed to the higher level, to the main, so I can maybe show the error in certain box or in a certain alert or a certain user interface. So I want the error to be thrown from here, from inside fetch user to main. I want the user here, the error here. So that's why I can type through error, or I can just console log or do any operation here. Okay, so when I do this, I need to return. So I have the response, then I want to return the response. So this function is either returning a response or throwing an error. And I want to store this data in, store this in a variable like data, you can say retrieved. Yes, kind of escalating the, okay, it's basically taking it to a higher level. Yeah, you can say escalating. We can do like we can do that one more time, Najla. No worries. So here I'm defining the API I want to call, or the server I want to retrieve data from. And here I'm using fetch which is a package provided by Node to call APIs. So the default of this is get. This is a get HTTP request. I'm having the response. I'm returning the response. If there is an error, I'm throwing the error to main by having it here. And then I'm calling main at the end. And what I can do is console log data retrieve. So let's look at the code I have here. Okay. I think I need a different version of node fetch. Okay. So throw an error is like, this is a keyword. So throw an error usually it's inside catch, and an error is thrown because it is an error. So this is the response is different. The response is something we are looking at, we are looking for. It contains data. It's different based on our request, but errors are errors. Like, you know, there's something wrong basically. So we need to, if there's something wrong, and as you know, developers spend a lot of time debugging. So if there's something wrong, we need to give more attention to what is happening. So that's why we catch, as the block says, we catch the error and then we throw it. So we can, instead of throw, you can do anything with the error. But throwing, as I told you, is to take the error to the higher level here. Yes, you need to download npm install node fetch. Okay, you need then to add this line, like constant fetch require. Okay, we can look at that at the time of labs. Let me continue now the lecture. You should do npm install node fetch, and then add the require at the top, and then you can use fetch like this. So if you look at my script now, I have pending, promise pending. And the reason is that this takes time. The data retrieved takes time, and I'm just doing console log here without waiting. So this also fetch users should be called in an asynchronous manner. So the main should be async as well, and I should await for the fetch. And as you can see, I had okay, I have all the response. There is size, there's timeout, there's body, and there's status. What I want is okay. I want to return the content of the message. So I do something like this, then I bring the response and do JSON. I pass it to JSON. This function bring me the JSON object that is inside the response, basically the body, or not the body. It's like the content. So okay. Yeah. So this is the response as a whole. There's size, timeout, there is body, and then there's the output buffer. I think this is the data we are looking for. So I want the data. I want, as like in Postman, I want this data. So in code to do so, I bring the response, which is the one you're seeing here. And I call .json on it because I want the JSON body of the response, which is this one, as you can see. I assign that to content, and then I return content. Here I'm waiting for the data retrieved. Then I'm logging the data. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 users with their names, which is the ones here. Okay, I'm gonna stop for 5 minutes. I'm gonna redo it one more time. So it's gonna be hopefully more clear. See you in 5 minutes. Okay, everyone. So we're back to APIs and how we can call APIs from JavaScript using Node Fetch. So again, what we are trying to achieve here is basically call an API, call an endpoint or a bridge on a server to retrieve certain data. So the data in this server, it's either users or location. I can retrieve all the data or certain data like this ID, this record or this. Each one of those is a different record, which is saved in a JSON format. You mean this link? This one? So you have to create mock API. You have to go to mock API and do an account, and it's gonna give you an automatic. Yeah, it's the one at the top here. So if you go to projects, create a new project, go to the project, you can access the link here. And after that, we can pass endpoints to the URL of the server to form an API request. To do this using Postman, you just need to decide the method of the request. Today, we are going to talk about GET, which is to retrieve data. And we just pass the URL of the server and the endpoint, and we will click send, and we retrieve all the data. So to do this using code, I can do this one more time. So we need fetch. We need to use fetch. So I'm using fetch from Node. So this is an old way to call APIs. Okay, the installation is npm install node fetch. And you can just, yes, of course, VS Code. Yeah, so we're gonna use VS Code, but I'm just looking at like the documentation of Node. So Node is, as we've talked before, it's the JavaScript that runs on the server. So we can use different packages from Node. One of the packages I'm using today is Node Fetch, and it provides us with a fetch function that we can use API through. So I've downloaded Fetch using this command. And I have an older version of Node, so I used Fetch version 2. This is according to the documentation. If you go to the installation, you can just follow the installation, which is here, npm install, and then if you cannot switch to ESM, please use v2, which remains compatible with common JavaScript. So you might need to also npm install node fetch 2. And now we can use fetch by calling require on the node fetch. So this is how node packages are called or are used. We use require for the module or the package, and we give it a name, and we can start using it. Now, I can have a function of API get users API, and I can fetch that API, the API. First, I can constant API URL, which is okay, great, which I can take from here. And since I'm fetching users inside this function, so the API URL is going to be static with users. Or what I can do is pass here something called endpoint. And I can say get API. And instead of having users here, I can say plus endpoint. So if I console log API URL, and if I call get API with users, as you can see, I have the full API with the users endpoint. So let's imagine I have different endpoints. If I have tasks, I can just call the function with tasks, and I have the URL of tasks. So I have get API, I pass the endpoint, and then I can fetch I can call fetch on the API URL. And as you remember, I need a wait because this gonna take time, and I want the response to be received, stored, then I can use the response. And also, this usually requires try catch. So I have the response here. Now the response, as you have seen, let's look at the response one more time. So the response is not readable. As you can see, it contains size, timeout, then body internals, simple, chunk size, So it's not treatable. The URL is here, the status is okay. This is the response internals. But what we need is the content. What we can do with the response is we can look at response dot, and you can see what. Okay, they're not there. Okay, we can use. So JSON, the JSON method is used on responses of APIs, which take the stream. Yeah, what we have seen is a stream, and as you can see, it's not readable, especially the output buffer, which contains the data, and reads it into completion. It returns a promise, which resolves the result of passing the body text. So this is the body text. This is the body, and I want this, and it needs passing. We use JSON function, and it's a promise, so it's asynchronous. So I want to also use await. So I want JSON here to get the body, which is called data, and we can have a constant, and we need to await. Now here I have the data. I want to return the data here and throw the error below if there's an error. And to look at the throw error, we can have another function. And this is the usual scenario of using Git API, that you have a main function or a bigger function that you use to call the Git API function. It should be async. And we have try catch block. And we have inside, we have Git API, which is await. And we have here users list or data retrieved. And as constant, and we can console log data retrieved. So in that way, I have two async functions. This is the higher level function, and this is the lower one. So what I do is I call the server from the lower level function, and if there's an error, I throw it to the larger one, to the higher level function, and I print it on the screen. I need to call main. So as you can see, I've called Get API inside main, and Get API calls function fetch. After it calls the function fetch, everything is stored in response. The response with its all information, the main data, in addition to like the data we're seeing here, the URL, the status, and everything is stored in response. I want the data. I use JSON function. This function is usually used with API responses to get or extract the body. And then I return this data to the place it was called, which is data retrieved here. Then I'm printing it on the console. So as you can see, I'm retrieving the data this way. Now, what we can look at is errors. So let's say okay, in the lower level, what we can do is instead of beside throwing the error, we can uh, manage or know what kind of error we are having through looking at the status code of the response. So we can say error occurred while calling HTTP request status code, and we can say, okay, it needs to be this, and we can have response dot status. So if we look again at the response, we have status here. Status is sent with the whole, this is the whole response. We retrieve the data from the output buffers through .json, but we can also access other like parameters or other information. So for instance, we have status here. We can access it by just saying response.status. So let's look at different status messages. So let's say I made a mistake here with the name of the server. It was 19. Let's say I made a mistake. I forgot the 9. And let's run the code. Okay. It's not defined. Okay, let's have a different error. Let's say I have something like this here. Not found. Okay. That's weird. Let's look at should return the status. Okay, this one where I'm getting the not found here. Okay. Okay, so what I need to do is check the response here. So it's giving me not found because I'm printing data retrieved and nothing is retrieved. So that's why it was giving me not found, but it's not catching the errors, which is something weird. Uh, we can check the data if it's not okay. So if the status here is like status is not successful. So if you look at the codes, HTTP error codes, 200 and anything is basically successful. This is telling me if the response is not okay, which means if the code is not 200 and something, then through we can throw an error even in the try. So we can say through new error, and we can pass, we can call the status here. Again, response not defined. Uh, okay, let's say it's working, but when I make the error, it's not catching the error as I was expecting. So what I was expecting is to give me status code of something. Like let's say I want to print a status code uh, even if I retrieve the data. So let's see what's gonna be printed on the screen. Yeah, so I have 200. So this means the request is successful and I'm retrieving the data. But I want, let's say, if we look at the mock API, there's the way is to call users, for instance, you need to use this URL with users at the end. But let's say I'm just by like I want to emulate an error. Let's say instead of IO, I want I. So I'm accessing a server that is not there because the server is IO. This is the full name or the full URL. I clicked I should have a certain error, which I'm having reference error. Let me check this. Okay. Okay, async main line 24. This is not defined. Why? Because the response return of data is not defined, which is here at line 17. Defined. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is to see how we can handle different errors. So I look at the status of code. So from the morning, you learned about HTTP requests status codes. So we have different status codes, 200 successful, 400 client errors, server errors. So in my case, when I type this I without IO, or if I have a mistake in the server, so I should receive status of 500 something. And if it's if I have let's say endpoint of 90, let's say I don't have a 90 ID, so I would receive an error of 400. And you can have a granular or like more deeper error handling. So you can say if says response dot status equal 404, for instance, you can have a certain message to the user. You can display certain message not found, or you can say HTTP error was not found. So this, I think many of you has faced this. If you access a website and that page is not found, is not there, it's not part of the website, so you would receive a not found web page. This is done by catching the status of the response. By looking at the status of the response from the server, you would have certain display. So let's say else if response dot status equal 500. We can say this is server error. So in that way, I'm checking the status of the response before passing the response to data. What we are doing wrong, or what I am doing wrong, maybe is like a constant of data should be defined before, and then assign that way data is empty, then I can return it here. Also, the constant of data received could be empty. And then I can assign something to it. I'm just debugging my code. It's weird. Okay, let's go back to the previous. Code. Okay, and if I have users here. Okay, now it's working. ID. Yeah, so as you can see, I have request found. Because status is 400. And I can also have the response of the response message. Of undefined. So why I'm having this, as you can see, look at the URL I have. It should look like this, IO slash, then the endpoint, which is I'm passing users. So it should be something like this, users. But what I'm doing is I'm adding US here, and I'm adding then endpoint after that. So it's US, it's us users. And this, if we go to the server, we don't have us users. We have users, we have location, and we can assign it here on the endpoint. So that's why I'm having the status code of 404 because it's not found. And as you can see, it's printed here. HTTP error, request not found. So in that way, you can have a control of errors, what you can do if certain errors happen based on the status code. Also, you can do this for the 500. 500 is if you go to the okay, server error, the server failed to fulfill apparently valid request. We can check the codes, like 404 is requested resource could not be found. The 500 is usually a generic error from the server side. Yes, I can do that. And okay, you need to change the code I sent. Okay, I'm gonna send it time. So I'm having the users through this. If I have, let's say, an error with the server name, I should have error 500 here. So error 500, server error 500, and I can do certain things to the error. If I don't have these options, the error is gonna be thrown this using this. Response is not defined. I expected a different behavior actually. response status. Okay. Dot set. Okay. So even though I have, if response is not okay, which is not 200, then through this error, I'm still not having it here. I'm having response is not defined, which is yeah, I think okay. The behavior is normal. Okay, I understand. So we need to check the status, and again we do so here we have a server error of 500, and the reason is again because server should look like this. And if the endpoint isn't there, then we would have 404. Yeah, request defined. And the outer error is basically response is not defined. So do you have any questions so far? I hope that I did not confuse you about this. I was trying to like simulate errors, and the errors I was trying to emulating is the 404 and the 500. So 404 is like the endpoint is wrong, or and because of that, okay, the what I'm requesting is not there, it's not found because I've added this here, and also there is server errors which is caused if you have any mistake with the server name. You can catch those and display them using the F statements. And here we are getting the body, then we're returning the data. And here we are calling the users. Also, what we can do, since we have Get API, yeah, it's great to hear that the concept is understood. The syntax could be solved. And again, if you look at other code, you would find different syntax. It's like this is not the only way to handle errors or the only way to call fetch. This is just a syntax that I felt it's easy and straightforward with async, with something we are familiar with, the async and the await. And just by introducing fetch, we can call any API. And in the labs, I can help you if you want any help. And here I can say, okay, this is the list of users. And I can also call another call at the same time for the locations. So okay, this is synchronous. As you can see, this is asynchronous. So this is gonna run first. Then this, it's gonna wait. The console log data retrieved is gonna wait for this. And this is synchronous. So I'm calling the locations using the same get API and by passing the endpoint of location, its location, maybe we can have it as, okay, its location. And then after that, I want to print this on the screen. So as you can see, I have two API calls on the same function. And here's also one benefit of using async, that I can have the two calls called asynchronously without the need to wait for each of these commands to finish and then jump to the second one. So as you can see, I have, this is the list of users, here it is. And then this is the list of locations, and here it is. So synchronous code, asynchronous code. So I have only two asynchronous code, but this waits for this, and also this waits for this. Now let's see the behavior if I have like relatively large amount of data. I have 100 for each. And let's call so I have the list of users first. And then I have the list, this is the list of locations after that with the following locations. Okay, So this is how we handle errors. We check the status code. And we should have else here. And we can say for any other errors, or if okay, what we can do is else if response dot status it's equal to 100, then read the data. And maybe we can define data outside, something empty. Okay, we can just then say return that. And if I have an error in the name of the server, okay, never mind. Okay, here I'm catching the error. So again, I'm having this issue because I'm trying to simulate an error. So that's why I'm having this issue. But anyway, this is the general code. And yeah, we get the API, we pass the endpoint, we use the API, we check the status for different codes. We catch errors here through using through error, and then we can call multiple APIs on the main screen. Again, I hope that I didn't confuse you for the last half hour because of this. But if you understand the concepts and if you have the main syntax, which is the async await and using node fetch and using mock API for testing with actually we can check errors here. So as you can see, if I pass 5888, it should give you 500. You can test that with the code like at 888, and you can expect 500. So you can say, okay, if the response is 500, then Postman display something went wrong. You can display the message that you want. If like there is error in the name, it's also 500. Okay, if I have two, I can get the two, but if I have 200 or 2000, I'll have the ID of 2000, then I have 500 internal server. So this is the get for today. Tomorrow you're gonna visit this one more time, but with different methods. You will see fetch, or you will see post, put, and delete methods. Today we are just using fetch. Um, we're using get, sorry, using fetch. So the last thing I wanted to tell you today, you can have something like this on fetch, and you can type the method, you can define the method. So usually the default is get, so you don't need to write this, but we can do it this way, and we can call the API. Okay, what we have changed, we should bring it back to how it was. Okay, so as you can see, I retrieved the users and the locations by adding the method get. This is the default. If you want to use post, then you have to open the brackets and add post, put, and so on. And you have to also pass. So post is for adding to the server, to sending something. So that's why we add other modifications. Tomorrow you will take a look at that. Now let's have a break for 5 minutes before we start the labs. And if you have any issues, anything that you feel you're confused about, you're not comfortable with, just let me know or let us know at the time of labs. I'm gonna stop for 5 minutes now, and we can come back shortly. Okay, everyone. So we will start the labs. Um, so if you check today's lab, there's, as usual, from starting from yesterday, there's a quiz with resources. So this is the lab for today. There's resources for the morning. If you find anything from today's lectures that aren't clear, you can check these resources, or you can ask us if you want. We will open breakout rooms as usual, and um, there's the quiz. We recommend again to answer the quiz questions today, but it's due for 1 week. Okay, I'm gonna open breakout rooms. Yes, you we can answer any questions in the breakout rooms. Yes, for sure. Skylar, do you have a question? I can